One of the most difficult things about experiencing a faith crisis, losing faith, or whatever you want to call it, is looking at yourself in the mirror and wondering, how could I have believed that? Welcome, friends, enemies, and everyone in between, to my channel, The Masked Mormon. I am, of course, The Masked Mormon.
Why you wearing a mask? Were you burned by acid or something like that?
Oh no, it's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future.
I'm a Mormon that used to believe in nearly all of the Mormon Church's truth claims. In fact, whenever I would start to question the veracity of the Church, I would instead stop and start to question myself instead, and just assume that I must be wrong. But as I learned about the history of the Church and realized it wasn't what it claimed to be, I kind of became embarrassed that I could have actually believed in those claims, especially with how I value the scientific method, evidence, and rationality. I had to question myself and why I would believe something that was so clearly not true. So how does this even happen? I consider myself reasonably smart. I have degrees in physics, mechanical engineering, and aeronautical engineering. How could I believe the myriad of claims that the Church makes, especially the ones that can be tested? How do smart people believe when there is so much evidence to the contrary? How did I believe for so long? Now, people believe in things for a lot of reasons, and we often come upon our beliefs honestly, and they are linked to some of the deepest recesses of our evolution. We believe in things because they serve a specific mental and practical function. Our beliefs are economical ways to organize the information in our lives, to motivate behavior, and to coordinate with others. There are all sorts of reasons that we believe in the things that we do, whether they are true or not. On a cognitive level, a coherent set of beliefs provides a stable model of the world. They help to reduce surprises and to reduce our cognitive load. An unknown future can be a source of stress that can be quite uncomfortable. Our beliefs also provide mental shortcuts called heuristics that help to simplify reality and provide emotional stability. Our beliefs also provide a narrative of sorts in the face of incomplete information and kind of serves to help fill the gaps in our understanding. And they help to define who we are as people. A system of beliefs reduces anxiety by providing meaning in the face of uncertainty and loss. They also help to reduce existential anxiety and can provide a sense of purpose. Our beliefs are usually obtained by social learning from trusted authorities, from caretakers, peers, and cultural institutions. We gain them by copying these influences in our own lives because, frankly, it's efficient. As social hierarchical creatures, we have a need to conform and to fit in with our tribe. A shared set of beliefs enable group cooperation, cohesion and predictability, and shared expectations. Sharing a set of beliefs with our tribe or other group can provide social capital, which then raises our standing in our group and, evolutionarily speaking, has increased our chances of survival. The values of a group can be contained in their set of beliefs that they convey to others. They help to provide a group identity. Our beliefs are an important aspect of the human condition. We can grow into and out of various beliefs depending on how old we are, who we are around, and various cognitive proclivities that we are individually prone to. Now, we each have all kinds of beliefs. We all think that our beliefs are based on rationality and logic. As emotional creatures, we are prone to emotional reasoning and irrationality, which can lead to those false beliefs. There is not a single person who is immune to false beliefs. A person's intelligence doesn't really excuse them from adopting irrational beliefs. Now, I held on to a belief in Santa Claus longer than most kids. I remember trying to push away any doubts about Santa's existence because I didn't want to risk not receiving toys on Christmas. There was also a magic that I wanted to hold on to. Now, even though on a fundamental level I realized that there was no way that Santa and his sleigh of reindeer could visit all the children of the world in a single night, I wanted so much to believe that I would push out any doubts out of my mind, until I finally just couldn't anymore. One Christmas Eve, after I went to bed, I knew my parents were still up, and I could hear the rustling of gifts and of stocking stuffers and everything else. In that night, my belief of Santa crumbled, and I remember feeling devastated as a new reality replaced the old one. The world became a little less magical, but at the same time, it also became a little more true. Now, why did I want to believe in Santa so much? I trusted my parents. I wanted the gifts. I accepted the magical premises. Now, I can laugh at how much I believed in an untrue thing. But this ultimately extends to other things, including my own belief in Mormonism. On this side of things, it is painfully obvious that the Book of Mormon is a made-up work of Joseph Smith, and that the temple ceremonies were co-opted from Freemasonry. But how can otherwise smart people believe in the face of incontrovertible evidence? Well, there are all sorts of cognitive mechanisms working against us that keep us locked into these beliefs. And even though I sometimes am a little embarrassed about the things I accepted as a believing Mormon, I think when we look back on our lives, we should extend ourselves a little bit of grace. But let's talk about some of those mechanisms. One is called compartmentalization. Compartmentalization is a coping mechanism where a person will push thoughts and emotions into mental boxes. A person can separate aspects of their lives into isolated parts, especially if these different aspects conflict with each other. In some ways, compartmentalization is related to cognitive dissonance. When someone holds conflicting thoughts, beliefs, or positions, they can become very uncomfortable. And in order to avoid this uncomfortableness, they will compartmentalize these conflicting beliefs, like a scientist who deals with empiricism, turning that aspect of their personality off when they go to church, and they learn about a 6,000-year-old Earth or about the Great Flood. I did this all the time, where through the week I would learn about physics, chemistry, evolution, geology, and whatnot, and on Sunday I would accept the various premises that the church claimed. I would kind of shut it off, kind of like a light switch. Or when directly confronted with things that I actually disagreed with, like the flood myth or a literal interpretation of the Garden of Eden, I would just tune out for a minute and then return when that part of the discussion was done. And I also learned pretty early in my time in Mormonism that you don't directly confront church truth claims. I remember in seminary when I was in high school vocally disagreeing with the teacher and him throwing various apologetic dodges my way, enough to cause me to question myself enough to just eventually back down. I have always wondered how many people ultimately do this. But this does kind of remind me of two quotes. The first is by Jonathan Swift. Quote, "You can't reason a person out of what he never reasoned himself into." End quote. A lot of my beliefs were partially handed down to me by my parents, specifically part of my belief in the Christian God and of some aspects of magical thinking. Then, based on those assumptions, I got the rest from my time in Mormonism. I ultimately didn't reason my way into the church. I liked the friends I had at church, and I felt I had confirming experiences that were interpreted through the lens of the church. And my tribe and social support system were the people of the church. My acceptance of my beliefs integrated me into my tribe and provided the stability and social acceptance that we all require. The second quote is by Upton Sinclair. Quote, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." End quote. Now, I don't think this just applies to a person's salary, but it could also depend on their social standing or their family stability or how they view themselves as part of their community. I accepted a lot about Mormonism because I wanted to be accepted by my tribe. I would question a lot of things, but I would only let that questioning go so far, because I could feel that if I got to a certain point, I wouldn't believe anymore. Or if someone, especially a non-believer, would push back on church truth claims, I would experience something called the backfire effect. The backfire effect is when someone's beliefs become stronger when they are presented with evidence that contradicts them. Now, I remember on my mission coming to a door where a husband and wife invited us in and then proceeded to try to save us. They told us about how incorrect our beliefs were and that we were in a cult. They said that if we wanted to and could get away from the other elders, they would take us in and protect us until we could get home. Now, I remember thinking that my experience wasn't anything like they were describing, so I ultimately disregarded what they had to say and was pushed further into my efforts to become a good missionary. Other reasons a person may hold on to incorrect beliefs is, ironically enough, due to having something called epistemic humility. So many members seem to defer to the experiences or testimonies of parents, trusted church leaders, or of church lore. There are so many stories that are shared by members that are told to reinforce the church narrative. The story of the first vision, tithing stories, miracle stories, and whatnot. It can be easy to defer to these stories and give the church the benefit of the doubt. When the promised blessings don't pan out or hold up to scrutiny, the person's first response is often to assume that they're wrong. Maybe they just didn't do the magical spell quite right. This is how I operated for years regarding priesthood blessings. I would try to be in tune with the Spirit so I could channel the words of God. But nothing really came. So I would just say what I heard other people say. Things like, I bless you with knowledge that Heavenly Father loves you and knows you and what you're going through. Or, Heavenly Father knows the righteous desires of your heart. Stuff like that. Now, perhaps I wasn't righteous enough, or perhaps I just couldn't differentiate the voice of the Spirit from the voice in my head. I figured that others were obviously having the promised experiences. I was the only one who was having a hard time with it. There must have been something wrong with me, right? But I never really stopped to consider that all these other people were making it up just like I was. Other times, our false beliefs hinge on a set of faulty assumptions. The whole truth proposition of the church is hung on a series of assumptions. If Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon, then he was a prophet. If he was a prophet, then he restored God's true church to the earth. And if this is the true church, then it has the authority to baptize and to perform all the other saving ordinances of the gospel. It's taken as a given that these assumptions are all correct, with the unstated assumption that there is a God and that God intervenes in human affairs. And it makes sense. If any of those assumptions were true, it might be reasonable to assume that the others that follow after it might be true as well. But a believing member will usually not question those assumptions. Those assumptions are the framework they build their life around. They follow the word of wisdom because they trust the assumption that Joseph Smith was a prophet. They wear the garments and go to the temple because they trust the assumption that priesthood authority resides in the church. They do whatever the church leaders ask them to do because they trust the assumption that the leaders are inspired by God who directs them. They read the Book of Mormon because they trust the assumption that it's a historical record of real people and was translated by the gift and power of God. Once these assumptions are examined and start to break down, the rest of the scaffolding starts to collapse as well. But even if those assumptions start to collapse and a person starts to see their beliefs crumble around them, they might still hold on for dear life because of the sunk cost fallacy. A person can feel reluctant to abandon something because they have heavily invested in it, even if that abandonment would be more beneficial. Mormonism consumes every aspect of your life. It tells you what to eat and what to drink, what underwear to wear, what to do with your time, how much money to give to the church, and so much more. It can give a solid scaffolding for a person to build their life on. And when they stop believing, they may stay in it because their family are all a part of it. Their job might require them to be in it. And it might just be all that they have known. They might even say things like, even if it isn't true, it's a good place to raise my kids. And I get it. Staying in the church, even when your belief falls apart, can be the more comfortable thing to do. It's easy. I did it for a while. We had the habit of going to church every Sunday and other meetings, even though I stopped believing. There was a lot of inertia that just kept us going. Plus, there was a little bit of sadness there. I felt like I was losing a friend. But eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. I didn't want to attend sacrament meeting. I didn't want to go to the temple. I didn't want a temple recommend. I didn't want to do the classes that had been repeating themselves over and over again for the last 20 years. What are some of the things that I used to believe that I sometimes feel a little embarrassed about? One of them is that there must have been an Adam and Eve of some sort, even though I didn't believe in a literal Genesis account, and I fully accepted evolution. Perhaps I would tell myself that there were a first people that God revealed himself to, or something like that. Another thing is that perhaps there must have been some sort of civilization in the Americas that matched those described in the Book of Mormon, even though there's never been any archaeological evidence found. Another was that the magical priesthood blessings could actually heal the sick, even though I had never witnessed such a thing. Perhaps medicine was the actual miracle, so God didn't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. I would tell myself things like that as well. And so many other things. Look, I have a PhD in aeronautical engineering, and even with my education, I still believed in this stuff for 20 years. I was talking to one of my daughters the other day, and she is quite the artist. And she was talking about some of the art she did when she was younger, and was kind of embarrassed by it. And I told her that as she develops her style, her tastes change, and that's all part of her development. And that she shouldn't be embarrassed by the work she created when she was younger. I think it can be similar for our previously held beliefs. I can be embarrassed by the things I did when I was a believer, but I did take on my beliefs in good faith. Now, having said that, I'm going to close with two quotes. The first is by Sasha Sagan, the daughter of Carl Sagan. Quote, "It is dangerous to believe things just because you want them to be true." End quote. So often we want so much for the world to be a certain way, and so we will believe in untrue things because we want to, especially in the world we live in right now, in the post-truth climate that we're currently experiencing. The last quote is by Carl Sagan from his book, The Demon-Haunted World. Quote, "One of the saddest lessons in history is this. If we have been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back." End quote. Mormonism bamboozled me for a long time. I rejected the evidence of the bamboozle. But what about you? What are some of the beliefs that you are a little embarrassed about? Let me know down in the comments. And if I can make a request, something seems to be going a little weird with the algorithm and my videos aren't getting as much reach as they usually do. If you can leave a comment and press the like button and maybe even subscribe, that would help my videos get more reach. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video.